Hi there, and welcome to our webinar. Today we'll be looking at managing potato virus Y. My name is Carrie Belanger, and I'm the editor of SpudSmart magazine and SpudSmart.com, and today I'll be acting as your moderator. First, I'd like to thank our sponsors, McCain Foods and BASF, for their support. I'd also like to note a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on SpudSmart.com following the event. For audio quality purposes, all microphones have been muted, with the exception of the speakers. But we do welcome your input. So if you have a question or comment, please share it in the chat box at the bottom left of your screen and let us know to whom your question is directed. Today, we have two speakers who will talk about managing potato virus Y. Dr. Mathuresh Singh is the Director of Agricultural Certification Services for Potatoes, New Brunswick, and McRae is a Technical Service Specialist for Insecticides and Horticulture Products at BASF Canada. We'll be starting with Mathuresh, who will talk about how to plan today to manage PVY, also management tools for PVY, what challenges growers are facing with respect to PVY, and new tactics researchers are developing to fight PVY. Then we'll hear from Anne, who will talk about a product currently being reviewed for registration for the control of piercing and sucking pests, such as aphids. Now we're ready to begin with our first speaker, Dr. Mathuresh Singh. Please begin, Mathuresh.
Thank you, Carrie. Welcome, everyone, on this webinar on planning to manage PVY. It's kind of a little late in season, but anyway, it's never hurt to have more knowledge for next year. So my talk is divided into four different sections, as Carrie mentioned. We'll be talking about first the major consideration in PVY management plan, and then what are the different tools for PVY management, and then what challenges growers are now facing with PVY, and what the research being done to mitigate those risks. Most of the data I'll be presenting throughout my webinar is from New Brunswick. That's where I work, and we have done extensive work for PVY management in New Brunswick. So what are the major considerations in PVY management plan? PVY does come from somewhere in the field to infect potato crops. So there must be a source. The first slide, please. There must be a source coming from either seed or from a neighboring field, or through inoculum source from outside. And once it comes in the field, then it starts multiplying, and then it has effect on the crop harvest. Slide number 10, please. So, as I mentioned, most of the inoculum comes from seed, then neighboring field. It could come from volunteer plants. Also, it could be from weed or cull piles. And then once it gets in the field, it reduces the yield, and also it could cause some failure in seed certification where the virus cap is necessary, and also it reduces the quality of potatoes where it causes necrosis. Number 11, please. So if some of you can see this slide here, the table which I have, that's based on New Brunswick data from almost last 8-9 years. if you see in 2011, we had only 35% seed, which was between 0 and 1%. And last year, up to 2017 crop, we got to almost close to 92%. And so that happened because of implementation of a post-harvest testing program, and also our growers started using extensive management tools, which we'll discuss later on. And because of planting clean seed, our post-harvest testing has been giving us very good results. Slide number 12, please. So if you see the next slide, you can see the green graph there, which indicates that from 2009 up to 2017, that line has been going, and that indicates the amount of clean lots tested in New Brunswick. If you see on right-hand side in the table, we have been testing somewhere from 500 up to 700, depending on what year it is, lots. And in 2009, we had average PBY close to 12%, but in 2016, it got to only 0.43%. In 17, we had a little blip, which went up, but then we're hoping this year should go down. So if you see from from 2009 to 2017, the more than 1% of PBY which were planted before has gone almost 7 times lower than what it used to. So that happened because of several factors. Number 13, please. So one of the best management tools is to plant really clean seed or with low PBY, which is the most cost-effective way to reduce PBY at the harvest. So this planting low PBY strongly reduces PBY at harvest, and given the yield effect of PBY, the risk of failing seed certification, where CAP is required, for example, like in New Brunswick, you cannot plant more than 4% PBY, or for example in PEI, you cannot plant more than 3% PBY. So in that cases, you save your seed lot from decertifying. And next slide, please. So if you plant low PBY, you can avoid the potential high risk of PBY. If you see in this graph here, as I mentioned before, the majority of PBY comes either from the seed lot or it comes from the other neighboring field. Based on some of the data which we have collected from New Brunswick, most of the farms here are mixed farms. Some farms they plant only seed, but there are majority of farms they plant either table stock or processing potatoes on their farm. And if you see the green bar, those growers who only produce high quality seed, the PBY level on their farm is quite low. It's less than 1%. But those farms which are producing more than 30% farm as a seed, and then less than 70% as a table or processing, they have a little higher PBY. And those growers who are producing more than 70% of their field with table stock or processing and less than 30% for seed, they they have quite almost twice as much PBY compared to a seed grower. So that does indicate that even though they're planting good clean seed, but the PBY is moving within their farm from different fields. Also, it could come from previous season carried over in cull piles or in field volunteers. So those kind of things should be avoided, and by using some non-potato crops, which means crop rotation also helps to reduce PBY. Next slide, please. So as we know that PBY comes from seed, then from different fields, but how it moves from one field to the other field. So aphid is one of the main vectors for the transmitting of PBY, and there are almost 20%, 60 different species of PBY. Aphids has been reported to carry PBY. They all transmit PBY at different degree, but most of them they can carry PBY. So once it's transmitted between field, then it gets transmitted between plant to plant by those aphids, and also it could be transmitted by some other mechanical means. So with managing aphid between these potato fields and plants, we have done extensive work on horticultural mineral oil, or you can call it mineral oil, combined with insecticide spray, which will reduce the PBY transmission. If you read in literature, as such, for PBY management, insecticide spray alone is not very effective, but we have found if we combine mineral oil with insecticide, it could be very effective. Next slide, please. If you look at this graph here, we did some work in 2010 and 11, collected several aphid from different fields, and they were tested using PCR procedure. So red line indicates that these are the number of aphids which were already infected with PBY, or they carried PBY on their mouth part, and the blue line indicates that's the total number of aphids present during the season, and the yellow bar in between, that's where the peak number of aphids were present. So if you see very early, the aphids can carry PBY, and then they can infect potato crop before even some of the plants are emerged. This yellow bar indicates that that's where most of the growers used to start their spraying program with either oil or combined oil and insecticide, and that's close to almost 50% plant emergence. So now, based on this data, we started recommending to our growers that they should start spraying crop when there's 20 to 30% crop emergence, or even earlier whenever they can get in the field. Next slide, please. So if you look on this slide here on right-hand side, there are 6 different graphs there, and what it indicates that we had 6 different fields, and those 6 different fields were sprayed with oil and mineral and insecticide 2 different times. The top 3 were where the spraying was done on June 29th, and the bottom 3 were where spraying was done on June 15th. And if you see the difference between those two, within 2 weeks of the oil application, the earlier field where spraying was done on June 15th, the amount of PBY is almost half than what is in the other fields. Even though some of these fields, when they were planted in June, they had a lot more PBY in those fields, but it's still because of the early application of insecticide and mineral oil, the spread of PBY was quite low. So that indicates that if we go early in the field, we can better manage the crop for PBY. Next slide, please. So since we started working on this problem in New Brunswick, the frequency of oil also is very important. From 2010 to 2014, we did an extensive project in growers' field, and what we found that some of the fields were in this graph, which is blue, where it says no spraying, yellow is moderate spray, and red is intensive spray. Blue means those fields where most of the fields were processing crop, and moderate spray were seed crops, and also intensive spray were the seed field. So in moderate spray, most of those growers, they sprayed 6 to 7 times or 8 times, but in intensive spray, those fields were sprayed 12 or 13 times combined with oil and insecticide. And most of this oil was used as a tank mix, and it ranged from 1.5 to almost 3 liters per acre, but average is somewhere around 2 liters. As you can see, from 2010 to 2014, from 2013 and 14, most of the growers started doing extensive spray, and amount of PBY, if you compare from 2010, has gone down quite a bit in 2014. And also, so that data we collected from the growers field, and then we took that and did a replicated trial for 3 years, and we used 2 different oil regimes. If you see the bottom graph there, you can see there is no spray. That's a control. We had close to almost average 10% PBY in those control fields, and insecticide only was not too far behind. So this indicates, as I mentioned before, insecticide alone does not really help to manage PBY. But where insecticide and oil was combined, in one case, there was 1.5 liter oil sprayed all through season, and in other case, it was 3 liters started, and then after 5 application went back to 1.5 liter. And you can see there was a huge difference between the no control or insecticide, and also mineral oil alone affects the PBY transmission, as it was quite lower than only insecticide. But when it's combined with oil and insecticide together, the results are better. And some of the insecticide which we found was quite effective. One is it belongs to lambda xylothrine, that's usually called silencer, or also it's called Matador, and Belief, and some other pyrethroid. And the silencer is quite cheap insecticide, and it's very effective for the management of aphid along with the oil. Next slide, please. So those are the different management tools which based on the chemicals, but there are also the other means of controlling PBY. So really, what challenges growers are now facing with PBY? PBY is not one virus, but several other strains. Before, everybody knew as a common strain like PBYO, which causes severe mosaic symptom. But now there are 3 major groups of strains, or one you can call common strain, or one is necrotic strain. And within necrotic strain, there are two different strains which are very common. It either is a PBY NO type or N Vilga type, and the other one is NTN type, which causes the necrotic spot on the tubers, which you can see on the left-hand side. This variety is cellulose and acicellose, and where these necrotic rings are very prominent. And on the leaf panel, you can see there's a Ranger russet, and those three different strains, they cause three different kind of symptoms there. So many of these strains, they can cause different kind of symptom depending on what variety they are present in. So new potato varieties with unknown susceptibility to PBY, and also the shifting availability and cost of effective insecticide and the climate change, they all together make it more complicated. We have seen new potato varieties which are released each year, and they respond differently to all different strains. So, and then based on different use of insecticide, that cost could go up. So, with the climate change, there's the summer temperature is going up, and then winter are very mild. So lots of these aphids are surviving. So these things are making a little complicated the PBY management plan. As you can see here, we have a table there where that's just a rough estimate of the cost of mineral oil and insecticide, which does not include the labor and also the operating costs for tractors and other things, because most of the growers, they are using, they are on a weekly program for late management, and therefore when they go for spraying up some of the fungicide for the late blight, they would add mineral oil and insecticide. So roughly it comes to about, depending on how many sprays are being used, it could be up to $350 an acre. Next slide, please. So recently we have just finished a major project which was funded by Science Cluster through CSC from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and it was supported by different provincial organizations from BC, Manitoba, Alberta, Quebec, New Brunswick, and Ontario, where we did screen some of the, there are 30 varieties we screened using different strains which we had collected from all over Canada, and also we did some field work where the previous thing which I explained to you about the insecticide and oil management, and also at the same time we explored the possibility of mechanical transmission during the cultivation. And so within those 30 varieties, what we have found is there are different range of symptoms, which I'll explain to you in next slide. But this, where we found the tractors when are being used for the spraying of some of these are being used for the cultivation, there are some mechanical spray taking place in the field. And we had 2 rows where no tractor was passing through, and in one case where the tractor was passing, and we had planted some infected plant, and we can see where the tractor was passing, it has 3 to 4 times higher rate of transmission for PBY, and particularly for necrotic strain in comparison to a control row where there was no tractor passing. So that explains some of the things where even if you plant low PBY, it could be transmitted by aphid, but as well as with the tractor as a mechanical transmission. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we have been doing some work on for fight with PBY, understanding the symptom of major PBY, strain on different important varieties. As I mentioned, we cataloged about 30 varieties. We found only 4 varieties which showed symptom on tubers, and rest were not showing any symptoms on tubers, which is good news. We also explored the other means of transmission, as I mentioned, such as mechanical transmission, and we're trying also to identify some other effective insecticide at the low cost and which has low environmental impact. And we're also helping some of the work being done at Agriculture Canada for developing different resistant varieties against some of these strains. Recently, we were involved in one of the projects which was done at the research center, which they have developed some markers which can be used to screen some of the germplasm which are being used for the breeding program and for future development of resistant varieties for PBY. So with this, I'll just summarize and emphasize that most of the work we have done in New Brunswick and also in Manitoba has been on the management of PBY using mineral oil and insecticide, and we have found very effective in 2 different environments such as Eastern and Western Canada. So with that, next slide please, I would like to acknowledge some of the help we received for doing this collaborative project. It was mostly supported by Agri-Science Cluster program through CHC, and also enabling agricultural research in New Brunswick and different collaborators from British Columbia, New Brunswick, and EI, Manitoba, and Alberta. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mathuresh. If anyone has questions for our guest speakers, please type them in the chat box at the bottom left of your screen, indicating what your question is and to whom it is addressed. Both of our speakers will have an opportunity to answer questions at the end of the next presentation. So in the next segment, Anne will talk about a new product from BASF. Take it away, Anne.
Thanks very much. Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening in today. I'm going to take this opportunity to give you a brief introduction to BASF's newest insecticide, Safina, which we believe will be a powerful new tool in the management of PBY. Safina insecticide's active ingredient is called Inscalis. It is currently being reviewed for registration in Canada for the control of piercing and sucking pests, the key pests being aphids. Safina is on track to be registered for the 2019 season for use on both soybeans and potatoes. Two of Safina's key characteristics are the quick onset of feeding cessation and its extended duration of control. As was mentioned in the previous presentation with Dr. Singh, the primary problem with aphids in potatoes is that they vector pathogenic viruses, such as PVY. Secondary to that, aphids, when in high numbers, can cause wilting damage by sucking nutrients from foliage and stem tissue. By stopping aphid feeding quickly with Safina, we can reduce the risk of spreading harmful viruses like PVY and limit feeding damage for up to 21 days. Okay, the following is a close-up view of aphid feeding. The time at the bottom is in minutes and is sped up to show you how fast-acting Safina can be. As you can see, the timer is counting down, and at the 0 mark, both Safina and the competitor insecticide are applied. The video shows how quickly Safina takes effect. It will be working before you have even left the field. This speed of activity is a benefit. If an aphid cannot pierce the leaf, it cannot spread the virus. Safina will control both green peach aphid and potato aphid, both of which can be responsible for carrying PVY. Safina can offer extended control for up to 21 days because aphids are affected both when they come in contact with Safina, when it is sprayed on them, and when they ingest it from the leaf tissue. In this graph, although it is only one trial, it does illustrate the added control from Safina both early in that first week after application and by the 3rd week after application, providing you with extended protection from aphids and the viruses that they carry. Safina is a neuromuscular disruptor in a new chemical class with a unique mode of action. This adds another tool for resistance management, as there is no cross-resistance to any other insecticides. This will allow potato growers to prevent the development of resistance or to manage populations that have already begun to develop tolerance to other chemistries. There are approximately 30 IROC insecticide groups that can be broken down into 3 major classes. The first are neuromuscular disruptors, second, respiration disruptors, and the third is insect growth and development regulators. The first 2, neuromuscular and respiration, are fast-acting. Usually you see their effects within the first 24 hours. Growth and development regulators are slower acting, taking more than 24 hours to affect the insect pest. Safina, as we saw in the video, is fast-acting and is a neuromuscular disruptor. So Safina's unique mode of action is not neonic, pyrethroid, carbamate, or organophosphate, but is in a group called pyropenes and is the first to be classed in subgroup 9B. Safina is a chordotonal organ TRPV channel modulator, which is a bit of a mouthful, and you're probably wondering what that even means. Basically, chordotonal organs are responsible for sensors in the antennae, mouth, legs, wings, and thorax. They provide insects with their senses of hearing, orientation, balance, and coordinated movement. When an aphid is exposed to Safina, sensory neurons send continuous and misleading signals, so the brain cannot detect sound, gravity, or body movement. The aphid will have odd sporadic movements, appearing drunk or dancing around, making it unable to pierce the leaf to feed and will eventually starve. So not only is Safina fast-acting and has a unique mode of action, but it also has a very low impact on predatory and parasitic insects, such as lady beetles. By protecting our predatory insects, we leave them still available to move to other fields or to come back again and help us manage aphid populations later in the season. What makes Safina an excellent resource is for your integrated pest management programs. Okay, I'd just like to thank everyone for hearing our brief review of Safina, and if anyone has further questions on Safina, please feel free to send me an email at ann.mcrae@basf-eggsolutions.ca, or if you're looking for more information on some of BASF's horticulture products, you can check out the website at eggsolutions.ca/horticulture. And thanks everyone for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, Anne. Our speakers have provided some excellent information today, but I'd now like to invite the audience to ask questions of our speakers. Please type your questions into the chat box at the bottom left of the screen. In the meantime, I have a question for Mathuresh. What is troubling about the rapidly shifting PVY populations from the PVO strain to new recombinant strains?
There are several things like symptoms of newly dominant strains like PVY-ENO or Wilga type or NTN is typically more cryptic than PVYO, what growers used to see as a strong mosaic symptom. And the other thing is these strains, they can circumvent PVYO specific resistance, particularly like a hypersensitive resistance, which is present in many varieties, and that could slow down the PVY transmission, and that's why we are seeing a lot more spread of other necrotic strains in comparison to PVYO. And also PVY, NTN, and some of the other strains of ANO or Wilga type that can cause the tubal necrotic symptom in varieties, and that can make the whole crop as unmarketable.
Thank you, Mathuresh. Anne, what is the significance of this new insecticide to producers as a tool for managing PVY?
I think the biggest significance is how fast-acting it is. I think with the spread of PVY, basically when the aphids pierce that leaf and are feeding, they can spread that virus. So the faster we can stop them from feeding, the better, and the better we can control PVY. So I think fast-acting along with some resistance management, because it has a unique mode of action, I think all of these things are really significant with Safina.
Thank you, Anne. Mathuresh, where have the more necrotic strains of PVY been showing up in Canada?
Based on some of our work in the last few years, we collected some samples from Western Canada and Eastern Canada, and really before I say for Canada, I'll say like in all over the world, everywhere the necrotic strains are spreading faster than the common strain, and common strain of, PVYO is almost disappearing. So what we found is in Western Canada, we're finding more ANO or Wilga type of strain, and in Eastern Canada, we're finding more NTN type of strains, whereas in US also, these NTN and EN Wilga type are spreading faster than the other strains in most of the states and in the province, as I said, in Canada.
Thank you. And do you have any application tips for growers when it comes to spraying Safina?
Sure. So Safina is translaminar. So that means when you apply it to the leaf, it will spread from the top to the bottom. However, it's not systemic, so it won't move up the plant when applied. So we really recommend that coverage is important, and you need enough, your water volume needs to be high enough that you're covering that whole plant to make sure you get the best results possible. So that would be my recommendation, is coverage is important. Thanks.
Thank you, Anne. Mathuresh, what is the most important thing growers can do to prevent yield and quality loss from PVY?
The first and most important thing is really planting good clean seed or with low PBY seed. And also, as I mentioned, the extensive program of using mineral oil and insecticide has really worked in our case in New Brunswick, and also based on some of the trials we did in Manitoba. So if they start spraying their crop early, when there's 20 to 30% crop emergence, earlier the better, and that way you can protect your entire crop. So when I say it's 20-30%, that means your crop is still like 20% was exposed, but then you can prevent your 70 to 80% of crop. And but if you start those sprays later, like after 50 or 60% emergence, then your 50 or 60% crop were really exposed to PBY infection in the beginning. So those are the two really most important things growers can do now to reduce the yield with PBY.
Thank you, Mathuresh. And why is it important to protect this new chemical class and its unique mode of action?
I think it's important for us to protect as much as we can all of our chemistries by rotating these chemistries, and especially with this new mode of action, if it's an excellent tool for PBY management. If we sort of abuse what we have by overusing it, then we don't get to use it as long as we could. So I think protecting all of our chemistries by making sure we're rotating our groups, that it's extremely important.
Thank you, Anne. Mathuresh, will the recent PMRA decision on lambda cyhalothrin impact growers' ability to control PBY?
Yes, we're very concerned about that. As I mentioned, the number one insecticide being used in New Brunswick, and I know in some other provinces it belongs to that lambda cyhalothrin, and mostly it's a silencer or matador, and that's one of the cheapest insecticide and very effective against most species of aphid. So if it's banned, we really don't have any alternative right away to use in place of silencer. And I say it's very effective, also very cheap. If you compare the price-wise, as based on some of the information we got from the growers, it can cost maybe about $15 to $20 per spray. But if you use other insecticide like Belief, that could be maybe $45, $50 an acre. So there would be a huge economic loss as well as the effectiveness for the PBY management if that decision comes from PMRA to ban silencer.
Thank you, Mathuresh. While we're on the topic, what is the return on investment with mineral oil and insecticide applications?
Depending on what variety you're talking about, but some of the examples I can give you, like a variety Russet Narcota and Russet Burbank. There has been some work done in U.S. and also in Canada, where roughly if you plant like 1% of PBY, you could lose from like $2 to $3 for each percent of PBY planted in the field, and it could be up to $80 per acre if you plant like somewhere between 9 to 10% of PBY. So but as I had shown one of the slide, the cost of protection really combined use of insecticide and mineral oil is close to $300 to $350 depending on how many sprays you're going to use. So if we assume that it's just on a very conservative side. If we are going to get 250 hundredweight yield per acre, based on that $350 cost, it could be probably $1.50 to $2, or maybe $2.50 per hundredweight. So it's not really that expensive, but that gives you a peace of mind and good quality seed for the next crop.
Thank you, Mathuresh. And how do producers protect the new chemistry in Safina?
Yeah, so for Safina, we recommend spraying no more than 2 times throughout the year, and then make sure you're always rotating with different insecticide products, something that would be in a different crop group. So Safina is a 9D, but we would recommend for resistance management to rotate to something that is not a 9. There's other products out there that are 9B, so your better rotation would be to be something that isn't a 9. And just so we can protect all of the chemistries we're using right now. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Anne. Mathuresh, what is the importance of cataloging the effects of each PBY strain on commercially important potato varieties?
There are several advantages of doing that screening program, really. So different varieties show different kind of symptom depending on what strains they are infected with. So, for example, like most of the varieties before, when common strain was present, they used to show good mosaic symptom. But with the novel recombinant strains, these varieties are showing very cryptic symptom. So, based on the number of varieties which we did, close to 30 varieties, we selected most of those ones from different provinces where they were grown at large scale. So now we know that which variety shows what kind of symptom, and whether some of those varieties, if infected with the necrotic strain, whether they show symptom in the tubers or not. So we have produced a book, and also we'll be putting that information on our website, and also it will be linked to CHC website. So growers, they are interested, they can go, or people can go and look at that link and see which variety produces what kind of symptom. And also we have calculated the yield loss based on primary infection and also secondary infection when the infected tubers are planted. So cataloging those varieties with these strains gives us the wide range of knowledge on symptom expression, yield loss, and symptom expression in tubers also.
Thank you. Mathuresh, what progress is being made by researchers and breeders in their search for resistant varieties?
As I mentioned in my talk, like we had collaborated some work with Agriculture Canada, and so they have developed a marker which before, if you are breeding a variety, it takes almost like 5-6 years before you can put in the field and then see the symptom. But by using this technology, they can screen hundreds of different genotypes for that marker, which provides for that gene, which provides the resistance to PBY. So that has been implemented in breeding program, as far as I know, with Agriculture Canada here. And also there are some different kind of resistance genes, like extreme resistance and hyper resistance is being incorporated in some of the varieties which are coming. Like for example, that a variety was released from U.S. program, Pacific Russet. That's very resistant for PBY. So there are several varieties are coming up which are either resistant or immune to PBY. And also we found in our program, which during screening we found Musica and Eva. There are two varieties. They are very resistant to PBY. So So we are hoping in future some of these varieties or lines which are resistant will be released as a commercial variety.
Thank you so much, Mathuresh. Well, that appears to be all the time we have today for questions, but I'd like to ask for any last comments from our speakers. Mathuresh, we can start with you if you have any last comments.
I would say just like there is no single solution to manage PBY, as it is spread by different aphid species. So we have to focus on like an integrated management system using good quality seed, and then start spraying early with insecticide and mineral oil, and that way you can produce the good crop at the end. And also I would like to thank all the sponsors for this webinar and all the listeners there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mathuresh. And Anne, do you have any other comments for our listeners today?
Thank you for listening in, and also we're looking forward to having Safina registered for next season, and hopefully once registration comes through, we'll have even more information to share with our customers. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne. Well, I'd like to thank both of our speakers for sharing their insights and expertise during this SpudSmart webinar on managing potato virus Y. I'd also like to thank our sponsors today, BASF and McRae, for their support. This webinar will be available on spudsmart.com if you'd like to view it again. And on behalf of the team at SpudSmart, I'd like to say thank you for all participating, and I hope you go on to have a fabulous day.